A sellable business is simply a well-run business. So even if you plan to run it forever, you should build it as if you're handing the keys over tomorrow, because that would enforce you to install systems and remove chaos.
A lot of people that I've met over the years, and then they get to a point where they think, I should really start thinking about selling the business.
If you are essential to every sale, every delivery, every decision, you don't own a business. You own a high-stress job that you can't quit.
It's always good to have one eye on building the business now to a point where the business will operate without you.
Here is a brutal truth. 80% of businesses put on the market never sell. And why? Because the owner is the business. If you want to build a premium asset, you have to make yourself redundant. So we're going to talk about that today. This is Beyond the Business. I'm Chris Gault, Strategic Business Coach at CH4B. This series dives into what really drives scale, the shifts founders must make in leadership, mindset, funding decisions, succession planning, and the ecosystems that support lasting growth. So if you're ready to move beyond firefighting and build a business that's truly built to scale, you're in the right place. Now, I'm joined again by CH4B's CEO, Neil Kilgore, and today we're going to talk about how to build a business someone actually wants to buy, even if you never sell. So Neil, most owners view an exit as something they do in 10 years, whereas we view it as a strategy for today. So I'd like to say to the people watching, we need to begin with the end in mind. A sellable business is simply a well-run business. So even if you plan to run it forever, you should build it as if you're handing the keys over tomorrow, because that would enforce you to install systems and remove chaos. So on this topic, have you got any opening words around that and how you feel around exit planning?
Hi, Chris. Yes, thank you. I agree with what you've just said, actually. I think that the most important thing, a lot of people that look at exiting their business or selling their business, and there's lots of different ways in which you can do that, of course. But a lot of people start thinking about it too late. And I think that's the big key here, and probably the biggest message that we need to get out to listeners today. You know, a lot of people that I've met over the years have worked in their business for, 20, 30 years, and then they get to a point where they think, I should really start thinking about selling the business. What are my options? And they start looking into it. And then they realize that, perhaps I should have thought about this some years ago, because often they are so intrinsically in their business and responsible for so many things that if they weren't there, the business just wouldn't operate. And I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. So then obviously it takes quite a long time for them to put themselves in a position where the business will operate smoothly without them on a long-term ongoing basis. So exactly what you said. I think anybody in a business, in any business really, if you're looking to sell the business at some point in the future, whether that be 20, 30 years in the future, it's always good to have one eye on building the business now to a point where the business will operate without you. And that will support you in so many areas, because as we know, and we've spoken about this on other meetings, Chris, if at some point, if you get ill or, you need some time out of the business, which is very likely that that's going to happen at some point in your life, building a business that will operate when you're not there every day.
It's a good point. You touch on there something I call the bus factor. So, owner reliance. And it's the harsh test, the horrible way to think about it. If the founder were to get hit by a bus, get ill, get hit by a bus, a nicer way, decides to go to Barbados for 3 months, whatever you want to look at it, does the revenue flatline? If yes, the business is effectively worthless to a buyer because they're buying a job, not an asset. There's a stat, according to Exit Planning Institute, that historically around 78 to 80% of businesses that were put on the market fail to sell, and they just end up simply closing down or liquidating, and it's because there's no transferable value. As you say, people are not building it to be able to be handed over, they're building it around themselves. I'm sure you've come into contact with quite a few business owners over the time that have fallen into that trap.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate, when you first start a business, you've got to put everything into it, and we all, are involved in every part of the business and doing multiple jobs. And, I appreciate that is the case. But I think that this is where it's important that once when I say get to a certain level, once you've got the business up and running and operating, that you have to start early in looking at how you can put automations in place and things that, even initially, if it's just starting with some of the simple things, trying to automate some processes that will save you time, or either save you time or the job will function without you there, maybe even if it's not everything, because that can take a little while when a business first starts, because obviously you've got to have a number of employees or systems and processes to do whatever it is that you're doing. And we can sit here talking about different industries, because obviously, as we mentioned off camera earlier, it is slightly different for different businesses, but ultimately it all comes back to that one thing, doesn't it? It's about having the right system, structure, people in place to deliver those tasks without you being there.
And you've, hopefully, don't mind me sharing this with the people watching, you've actually experienced that firsthand, the bus factor test as such, when you got ill. Well, yeah. Essentially.
So when I was hit by a bus,
the illness. But how did that experience, what did you learn, and what did that teach you when that happened?
Well, I was very fortunate, actually, and I think that happened without me actually planning for that day. Obviously, you never really plan for that day. You will never know it's coming. I didn't really plan for that day in mind. I just planned from the point of view that I wanted to have a business that wasn't just myself that was involved in making all the decisions and running the business. And I was very lucky that I had a very good senior management team around me to support the business whilst I wasn't there. I was ill, as you know, and had to take, I think, about 8 months out of work. And when that happens, your focus, when we're working every day in our businesses, the most important thing is the business, and all the decisions and things that we do are all really important. But the reality is, when all of a sudden one day you get a message that, it could be, that you're not going to be here anymore, all of a sudden none of those things matter, and the only thing that matters is your family. How am I going to get better? Can I get better? And all of the other things just become not important at all. But obviously they are important to some people, because all the people that the people in your business and the people it supports, they're still very important to them, and it is still important to you to a degree, but you just don't focus on it. So I was in a very fortunate position that I had a really good management team. It wasn't perfect. There were things that I did that I wish I could have, in hindsight, done better to make it easier for them. But I was very lucky. I had a great management team, and I was able to take some time out, 8 months, recover, get myself better, before I started working again. And they did a great job, considering I could have done even more to support them better in that situation. And now, obviously, we share that story, Chris, because we want to let people know that some of the people we work with, we know that's going to happen to them. We don't know which ones, but we know that is going to come. So if they can prepare now and put themselves in a position, it just makes it so much easier. Because it's one less thing you haven't got to worry about if you do get hit by that bus.
Exactly. And firstly, I know we've used this story before, and I appreciate you sharing it with anyone watching this. The thing you said during that was the fact that you weren't necessarily planning for that event to have happened, but you were planning a certain type of business. And coming back to the topic of exits, which is one of the reasons why you'd plan your business in this way, it's because that is the valuation gap. If you are essential to every sale, every delivery, every decision, you don't own a business. You own a high stress job that you can't quit. And to get a premium multiple when you do exit your business, you must fire yourself from the day to day. Now, you had chosen to put that plan in place before that event happened anyway. What was your motivation behind putting that in place? Was it, yeah, tell us.
It's difficult to remember how you think when you go back a long time, because I think as you move forward, your thinking changes and you do things for different reasons. You know, at the time when I go back in my early days, I worked a lot of hours, you know, worked all the hours really, did every job, you know, from starting the business. I remember cleaning the loos and, you know, doing the cleaning, emptying the bins, everything, you know, even when we had half a dozen employees. You know, that was just to keep the cost down and just get involved in everything that I could. And as the business develops and you can see your time becoming more valuable, you obviously start employing people or putting systems, processes in place to do some of those other roles that you can see you're more valuable in other parts of the business. So that's really where it started for me. And those principles and those actions that you take, as you say, we're talking today about somebody exiting their business and selling their business, but ultimately that's just one of the benefits of this. I mean, there's so many benefits. As we know, most business owners we talk to, they work too many hours, too many days, not enough time with their family. You know, this is the constant thing we hear all the time. And ultimately, by putting these things in place, yes, for that end result of selling the business is the maybe the end aim at this point, but it could be that if you get that business right and you get it to a point where it is operating really well, that you can actually create the time, enjoyment, see the family, work less hours, have a successful business. And you might get to the point where you decide, do you know what, I did all this because I wanted to sell the business, but now I'm actually quite happy running the business and I don't want to sell it anymore. I want to keep running the business because you've built it in such a way that gives you the life that you want. So many people I see that do sell their business, they sell their business and then it's almost an anti-climax because they've worked all their lives to build this business and it's been their baby for so long that the money hits the bank. And yes, it's nice to have that money in the bank for selling, but ultimately from that day on, it's like, well, what do I do next? And I think that's another conversation or part of it to have that planned as well, because whereas if you don't sell it and you get yourself in a position where you might start working 6-7 days a week, but if you can get to a point where you're working 4 days a week and you're spending time with your family doing all the other things you love, or 3 days a week, then you can actually have a balance of doing it all and enjoying it all, which ultimately is what it's all about.
Yeah, and do you know what? That's what the conversations I have with members through CH4B and with business owners I come into contact with. As I said at the beginning, it's about begin with the end in mind, whether it be exit, whether it be the lifestyle you just talked about. What was the reason you went into business? What is the outcome you were looking for? What is the purpose of this business? And often people have gone into business to make money and live a decent, enjoyable lifestyle. And that's different for everyone. But whether that be a decent income, that means you can afford, you know, the big holidays, you can afford nice days out, great meals, time with family and friends, as you've highlighted. You know, if you keep that in mind and you build a business that can provide you that, as you've said, allows you not to have to work in the business day to day, makes you the money you need, you're also preparing for exit if you do choose to sell down the line, because they come hand in hand. So going right back to why did you start a business in the first place? I don't know anyone that started a business because they wanted to be self-employed, essentially. Most people did it because they wanted some form of control over their future. And so that's what we've got to, you know, paint with. And so one of those drivers, if we are looking to sell at the end, is how do we drive a premium price for the business? Now, this could give you your lifestyle you want as well, but data consistently shows that businesses with reoccurring revenue models, SaaS, retainers, those sort of things, they trade at valuations of 2 or 3 times higher than transactional service businesses. So investors will pay for predictability. You know, if you've got a contract worth £10,000 a month for 3 years, it's probably worth 5 times more than a single 360k project, because that one's been and gone. So one thing you could do with your business to get the premium price, whether that be for your own regular income or for selling at the end, is shift your model from hunting to framing. Have you got any other thoughts around that and how to maximize a premium price with your business?
You know, coming back to what you first said there, Chris, I think that's the one thing that really I love about what we do within our business. The people start a business for often very similar reasons, but when you actually talk to them a year, 2 years in, they've forgotten the reasons why they started their business. And when you look at what they're actually doing, it's far from that original thought or motivation that they started. And, you know, for me, one of the most enjoyable things is getting them back on track and realizing what it is they're actually doing it for, why they're doing it, because then that changes everything within their business, because they start focusing on the areas that really matter rather than just going through the process of doing those day-to-day jobs that they were doing previously. And I think it does depend obviously upon the industry, the type of business it is, and we have to look at each industry slightly different. But you're 100% correct that, you know, building a business that has residual income is going to have a much higher valuation. And I think there's some businesses that have opportunities to diversify, to look at what they're currently doing now. And I know we've worked on a few businesses together and done exactly this, where they've been great businesses, they're earning good money, but, you know, we've looked at how can they diversify slightly to bring in additional revenue, not only that supports the business further and creates more income, but it creates more stability and it creates more long-term wealth. Obviously from industry to industry that does change, because there's some industries that are more there's more things you can do or more likely to look at there, but without a doubt looking at a residual model that obviously has massive support for that business.
And you're right, it can, you know, every industry is different. Some businesses do typically face value, they are a transactional business. You buy my service or my product, you receive it, and jobs. But even then, if you can stay innovative, if you can stay creative, or you can employ the right team around you to help with that innovation and creativity, if you give them a clear vision of what you want the business to be able to do, you can find reoccurring revenue models within there to boost that value of your business. So as well as making sure it's not fully reliant on you, it's that, what is it we actually do? You know, how enticing is it to someone looking in that we've got this reoccurring revenue in the business? So
yeah, it's about that stability, isn't it, Chris? You know, if you've got a business that sells a product and but the product, let's say, is something where somebody only buys once, and you've got to have this sales and marketing machine that just generates, or a bit like one of my businesses previously, you know, in the home improvement sector, you know, you're continually trying to find new clients. So you've got to continually market and find new clients to sell your products to. And how can you diversify? Well, there's lots of things you can do. You can obviously look at other, especially once you build a customer base, look at other products and services that you can sell in conjunction with what you already do, because you've already got a customer there that's happy with what you've done. So that's one route. And then, like you say, there's always other things, whether it be service plans or other things that you can introduce that will give the business some stability and longevity that somebody would always look at when they're buying a business. And I think that's why it's more difficult to sell those businesses that are, you know, one sale, one transaction sale, and then that's it, because they're a lifestyle business almost. You know, that's you know, it could change overnight. So the business is only worth what it actually generated this month. And it's about building something that you can actually sell that has real value.
it de-risks it for the buyer when you look at it that way. You've made a good point there as well about the lifestyle business. Now, yes, you may have gone into business because you've wanted to create a certain lifestyle for you, but you need to make sure it's, as you've used the words, sustainable, and it's got to be attractive to other people. In the UK, it's estimated 100,000 plus businesses enter the transfer zone every year, usually as owners retire, and it creates a buyer's market. And so you have to stand out to get sold. Well, there's a problem if you're treating your business too much like a personal wallet as such. Buyers will send in forensic accountants for due diligence, and if you are treating your business like a piggy bank as your personal wallet, you're putting your cars, your holidays, your family meals through the books, too often it destroys trust instantly. So it's not that you can't do that sort of thing, but you need clean books to give higher confidence, to give a higher price for your valuation of your business as well. So if you've built the value in the business, how do you actually get the money out without destroying what you've built? Well, there's one thing, having those financial hygiene, clean books. But are there any other tips, good practices that you'd encourage people when they're looking at their business to make sure it's going to get the most out of it at the end?
I think there's, as you said, if you're going to sell the business for some years, you have to be in a position where everything's as clean, transparent as possible, because otherwise, businesses can look very messy, which puts people off wanting to buy them. And as we spoke earlier, there's lots of different ways in which you can sell your business. But I think that if the business is clean and well run, it's much easier to make the right decisions to improve profitability and to improve or drive down costs, because it's not clouded by all the other stuff. If it's run properly and efficiently, the metrics that you can get from a business are that much more accurate, that you can drive the figures harder. And I think some people focus on the wrong things there. It's easier to, I would just say it's easier to drive profit, create margin, drive revenue when you've got an accurate set of figures to look at. And ultimately, if you're combining personal, like you mentioned, personal stuff, which obviously there's only certain stuff that you should be including within your business anyway, but it just clouds those figures, and the benefit is actually less than what you might think it is.
And I think you touched on there as well, there's multiple ways of exiting your business. Now, we won't go into huge details on each one individually, otherwise this would be a very long episode for people to watch. But there's various things. There's trade sales, there's management buyouts. Management buyouts, if you're selling to your team, this actually protects your legacy and culture, but it often yields less cash up front than a trade sale. You've then we work with a lot of accountants, and you're selling your management fees, and often your management fees can be related to the relationship you've had, depending on how you've structured the business. And so there's time for, a time period that you've got to factor in as you're being bought out, that you will still be working. So there's these different routes to exit. And this is before we even get onto the emotional costs to a business owner, but there's these different ways out as such. From the people you've worked with before who've gone through this, what have you seen and witnessed as people have exited businesses, and the various different ways there are to exit?
Well, I think there's two things to focus on there. The first thing is where the business is right now, and what the business looks like. And secondly, obviously, what the business owner wants to achieve. Having a look at both of those things, quite often it will be that in a lot of the different ways in which you can exit the business owner will be required to work within the business for a period of time. That isn't necessarily always the case, and obviously, as we've talked about, if the business is created and set up properly, that the business owner's not needed there, then obviously somebody could come and buy that business and just take over from day one. But most of the ways in which you would exit a business to maximise the benefit for yourself and to keep stability for the business would be to do it over a period of time, whether that's through a management buyout. But again, it does depend upon the business. But to hold somebody's hand through that process for a period of time. And again, I think you have to look at each individual business, look at the sector that they're in, the structure of the business, what the business owner's looking to achieve. And like we've had these conversations with some business owners, Chris, I know, where the other thing is getting them to think about what they're going to do after. I think that's the thing as well, because it can hit you like in people I've spoken to, it hits them like a bus, so to speak, that they sell the business and the next day it's like they think it's going to create this euphoria moment of, oh my God, I've achieved always what I wanted to achieve. I've got the money in the bank. But all of a sudden they just feel no worth and no purpose because there's nothing left other than the money in the bank. And I hear this all the time. And so thinking about that and planning for that, I think is just as important as getting the most for their business and getting the most money in the bank. Because ultimately, we hear this time and time again, but it's not about the finishing post. It's about the journey, isn't it? It's about trying to enjoy the journey and the process that you go on, because when you come to achieve that goal, like anything, it's what's the next one? What's the next thing you want to do? Whether it's a business or whatever it is, it's about having a clear plan on what you want to do that's going to give you that satisfaction and sense of worth, I suppose.
And that, from the experience of the business owners I've worked with, that is the biggest thing. It's that seller's remorse. The day after the sale is the most dangerous day for an entrepreneur, because if you don't have a plan for your life, not just your bank account, you will struggle, because as you've said, you lose your identity. You don't know what's worth. So so many business owners have I've worked with have gone, oh, so I'm thinking I want to sell next year, or I want to sell in the next couple of years. And it's like, well, you should have been thinking about it 3-5 years ago, because once you've got the buyer, as you said, there's probably going to be a couple of year period of handover, subject to how your business is structured and what industry you're in. But most of the time there will be a period of time. And then also, have you looked beyond that? What's going to happen after that? Because that's not, as you've put, that's not the finishing post. It's just the next chapter is, one chapter is closing, the next chapter is opening. And there's so much you can do. So a lot of the work we do with people as well is, it's not just on the business, it's on them as business owners, it's on their mindset, their mentality, their outlook on life. It's a really interesting point, because I think it's probably, as I said earlier, we could go into all the different routes to exit that are available. But for me, this is one of the biggest parts here. Yeah, you've got to set up your business ready for that exit. But what have you done to set yourself up for exit? I've seen a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and with the questioning and really getting underneath the sort of driving force for any individual that's in a bit, and there are everybody's got different reasons that they do what they do, but really understanding that is where we can support those people better, because it's not about us guiding them, it's about them identifying where they are and them guiding themselves. And I know we've spoken about this often, it's easy to tell somebody what to do, but when they actually start realizing themselves and looking at it from a different perspective, they end up guiding themselves in a different direction, or thinking about it from a different perspective.
I think that perspective is what we need people. That's the change we need people to make. The change of perspective towards what an exit actually means. It's not something to be thought about down the line, 10, 20 years down the line, when maybe you're getting bored of the business, or you're getting tired and you want to do something else. From the very beginning, you need to reconnect with what is the purpose of the business. What is your vision for the business? What is also the vision and purpose for yourself as the business owner, before, during and after business? And plan then, because the message I'd say, want to finish on for those watching is, don't wait until you're tired to plan your exit. You need to start building the premium today. That's where I'd finish with people. Is there sort of a takeaway you'd give people to finish on?
No, I exactly what you've said, Chris. I think that it's not, yes, looking at how you're going to exit the business is important, but by doing that, it's how you support yourself with everything else that you're doing within the business. It will create you more time to spend with your families whilst you're running the business, because things will happen, whether it's not necessarily health things, but things will happen to you, your family, where you need time. And to have a business that's structured in a way that will allow you to do that is really important, because sometimes you have to do things and take time out. And if the business will carry on and doesn't need you, or won't fail or struggle because you're not there, it will at least take away that sense of it will at least you can focus on what it is that you need to spend that time on, rather than focusing on your business. So I think by getting those things in place will allow you to enjoy running the business whilst you're running it, and not just give you the end result, which is what you're focusing on.
Yeah. So thinking about exit early on actually makes business more enjoyable. So don't wait until you're tired to plan your exit. Start building the premium today. Start enjoying being a business owner again, and still get the reward at the end of it.
Absolutely.
Neil, thank you very much again for contributing. Hopefully the viewers have got something out of this. If they have, hit subscribe, see the rest of our content as well. And we'll be back, I'm sure, with some more very soon. Thanks, Neil.
Thank you, Chris.